accept it as beyond a symptom, as
Right.
this is who you are. You've been given that gift.
Well, I don't believe in taking things on as making your challenge part of your identity.
Right.
You see, by saying I'm an epileptic, you've now taken it on. You're now going to hold on to that for the rest of your life.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if you say I have the symptoms of an epileptic, or my body is responding in an epileptic manner, you see, that's a little bit different.
Right.
That's
Right.
not as definitive, and you're not holding on to it as much. And then you're open to the possibility of one day finding a way to release that symptom or releasing that condition. But when you make your identity your challenge, forget it. You're going to hold on. As long as you keep that as part of your identity, you're always going to have it. Now, epilepsy, right? This is a misfiring of the brain.
Correct.
Why would you come down with epilepsy and somebody else comes down with something else? There's a reason. There's an energetic reason why. Now, you stated before that you're both highly creative as well as very intellectual, but that causes you problems because there's some disconnect there.
Correct.
What is epilepsy but a disconnect of the functioning of the brain? So
Right.
why did you happen in this life to manifest the symptoms of epilepsy? Because perhaps energetically there's some disconnect in your soul, in your spirit, that there are sort of, you see yourself as having these two different sides as opposed to seeing them both as part of the whole.
Well, that's the full circle theory. Essentially, when I was at NYU, I did a thesis about how depression affects epilepsy. And what I discovered is that it affects it, and epilepsy affects depression.
Of course.
So it's a full circle that most people don't understand. I mean, I think you mentioned on your show that everybody's thinking absolute, and everybody's not
Right.
realizing that that small picture is part of a bigger picture.
Right.
Epilepsy, as I keep trying to infer, in some ways, for myself, and I've noticed, is a gift. I've been able to use it to my advantage in certain ways. I don't want to say all
Right,
of
but
you
what's
out
the
there.
message of the gift?
The message is, okay, you think differently than other people. Your brain is reacting
Good.
differently. You have certain creative outlets that probably most people don't have. Your brain could be processing those outlets. Own those outlets. Understand how they add value to people rather than, oh, okay, I'm going to have a seizure on the floor. You're going to be distracted. Please send me to the hospital right away. Now, I could tell you my neurologist and my psychiatrist, who is seeing me for seizures and depression, have both said mine is genetically influenced. For those people out there, epilepsy does have a genetic component. There's still testing going on, and there's no way to prove it at the moment other than to continue taking your medications. However, there are people, including a guest here today helping us with our YouTube channel, who had suffered seizure disorder because he was hit by an SUV.
Right.
That does not mean he was epileptic because the seizures eventually stopped.
Right.
When you are suffering from epilepsy, which is what Robert Fiore had said on the first show to refer to it.
Right.
Correct. Don't own it as an identity. It essentially begins to understand that when you are not owning it as your identity, but you're owning it as an issue, you can then manage the difference between
it's a
epilepsy
challenge.
and seizure disorder.
Right. And it's also a challenge. And when it's genetically inherited from an energetic perspective, that means you're here not just to heal your own challenge, but you're here to heal your lineage.
Right.
Whereas someone getting hit by a car and then they have a disorder, well, that's their own energy situation that they need to heal. But when it comes genetically, it actually means you're here. And I've worked with a lot of people that are here to heal the lineage, not just what you're doing. So the work that you do to heal this challenge that you're facing is not only going to affect you energetically, it's going to affect your ancestors as well. Now, a lot of people feel like, oh, ancestor stuff, that's crazy. That's ridiculous. I used to be one of them. I always thought, how do my ancestors, they don't affect me. They're not here. They're dead. They're long gone. How could they affect me? But the truth is they do, because we carry our ancestors within our physical body. Our DNA, we can't even measure how many generations old our DNA is, which means that we have information inside of us that goes back hundreds, if not thousands of years. So we do carry our ancestors with us. The indigenous cultures have it right. A lot about indigenous healing has to do with ancestral healing. And we tend to poo-poo it and shun it as like superstition and like, oh, they don't, as primitive beliefs and primitive worships. But you know what? Scientifically, actually, there's more to it than that.
Well, yeah, at the same time, when we are living in a much more modern society with modern technology, modern treatments, and we've learned about epilepsy in the current condition versus generations ago, I believe one of the gifts is, okay, now you can educate through different channels those various generations ago about how epilepsy was formed for whatever reason, and how we now have some of the answers.
Right. And again, you know, epilepsy, what is it? A misfiring of the brain. So there's something misfiring. There's some kind of disconnect. And actually, I believe if you can find the right person to help you heal for yourself that disconnect, your seizures will go away and you won't need your epileptic medication anymore. But it's getting down to that root cause. It's getting down to, why is this happening? There is an energetic, some would say spiritual reason why this is happening. Why did you choose your parents to be born with? There's a reason why. There's a lesson there. And when that lesson is released, solved, light is shed on it, accepted, and you evolve through it, you can actually move past it. Now, supposedly genetic epilepsy is an incurable disease. Yet I have seen so many people, I've met so many people who have had quote unquote incurable disease find cures for them. So part of it is not accepting the commonly held beliefs that anything is incurable, and not accepting that there's nothing more you can do for it than pop a pill.
And thanks, Sam, for that. I just want to say to everybody, before we take our next break, there is a religiosity component to epilepsy, just to let you know, unless you already know. For those people, acupuncture always works with me as well to help divert the energy. #epilepsy, #mental health. We will be back in a bit.
Ding 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 ding.
Hey, everybody. Thank you for coming back to this episode of Frank About Health, Brain Peace. Now, we've just spent some time talking with Sam about a lot of the different aspects of epilepsy and depression and how they are not to be associated with your identity, but rather to be associated with the condition you've inherited for whatever the reason. Try to understand the reason. Try to understand a better way of using treatments to help your quality of life. But before I go into the final segment of this show, I just want to remind everybody that mental health in general is still a very expensive disorder. There are people out there for various reasons who are still going to have to do their traditional treatments. There's psychotherapy, there's psychoanalysis, there's psychiatry, depending on the degree of your depression or epilepsy. You have to, at the same time, as I said, and as Sam has been saying, you have to engage in music therapy, walking, acupuncture. Those things considered are integrative and much more important to work hand in hand together. I also wanted to remind everybody out there, Jordan, please forgive me if you're hearing this and I forgot your name. Certainly haven't forgotten you. Jordan Rosenblatt, Rob Rosenblatt, Mark's Marine Pharmacy in Vancouver, Canada. YouCanShipMeds.com is where you can place your order, and they have a 888 number, which at the moment I cannot find, but I apologize. I'll be tweeting it later. But these people will be giving free shipping from Canada for your medications for whatever your disorder is, at also prices that are 80% lower than what you'd find in the United States. So please take advantage of this offer. #mental health, #epilepsy. At the same time, I just want to point out, mental health has always been a challenge in understanding. It is my recommendation that you find a lot of books, whether you download them to your tablet or whether you actually buy the books, to understand the dynamics of mental health. Depression can be a core, ironically. There are people with other pervasive disorders, such as schizophrenia, psychosis, all these other aspects that really are specialties unto themselves. But I have found, even from my own personal experience, that depression is a core of a lot of mental health issues. I also want people to know out there it can be considered a disability. That's the way our society works. If you do have a major depressive disorder and it is disabling for you, there are programs out there where you could find support from the government and the medical profession. I also want everyone to know that Danielle Swanson from Body and Brain, who is an epileptic patient and who suffered from depression herself, will be here on the show in 2 weeks to kind of wrap up a lot of the comorbidities between those two. As I mentioned earlier, I've done research in the area, and I developed a variable called QOL. That was the proof of my hypothesis that it is a quality of life issue, and it really cannot be managed other than managing your quality of life. You've heard a lot about different treatments from Sam. You've heard a lot about different treatments that are traditional and that I myself can still recommend. But I want everyone out there to know that the key aspect of this episode in particular is to have everyone out there, after the show airs, to engage in communication. So I'm going to give much more information. If you want Danielle Swanson, you can reach her at Body and Brain, BODYN BRAIN. If you want to reach me, at Frank Healthcare, Frank Healthcare. If you want to reach Robert Fiore, who is a very big advocate of epilepsy, he is at CT_EA_ORG. He's been looking at approving cannabis in the state of Connecticut. Overall, there's just a lot to learn. There's not enough to fit into this one show, but I know what working with you, Sam, as we did a few months ago, it's just the ability to create that conversation to understand.
And I just want to leave your audience with just one point, and that is not to give up. Looking for answers. That as long as you have another day, another breath, there's so much out there in this world. There's so much more that we don't know than we do know. There's so many mysteries to life. There are people who have found ways of releasing challenges of all kinds of different conditions that, and it may sound extreme. Maybe you have to go to the jungles of the Amazon forest in Peru. Maybe you have to go to the indigenous tribes in Australia. Maybe you have to find some healer in Europe or the Middle East. It doesn't matter. Keep looking. Find other people. The best thing to do is find somebody else who had the same condition, who found a cure for them, and see if that can work for you.
Absolutely.
Again, I'm not saying you have to buy into every snake oil salesman out there. You've got to do your research. You've got to, be somewhat critical, but you also have to be open, and you have to, give a chance to life. That to believe that life wants to support you, that life wants to help you, and that if you're just open and you take some effort, you make some effort and you take some of your energy and you pursue finding what can work for you, you can be amazed at the results.
I totally agree. I mean, again, it is a lifestyle. If you have epilepsy, if you have major depression, I don't want to call it a lifestyle because probably you were not born with it or probably inherited through a post-traumatic event. However, it can become part of your lifestyle. The issues that I believe Sam and I have been addressing on this episode of Frank About Health is try to use your disorders and incorporate them into your lifestyle in as much of a productive way as possible. You have to look at, for whatever reason you've been given a disorder, for whatever reason you've been given gifts from that disorder, you need to use them, not sit back and wallow and think, okay, why do I have this? I think my life is over. There you go. That is what I hope that this particular episode will do, is convert the process and the perception. Perception is everything. It impacts you in a lot of ways and manifests throughout your relationships and your overall quality of life. So I would say...
Right, and as you mentioned before, find the like-minded people like yourself who maybe have a similar condition, who are not willing to accept, the standard answers, take this pill and that's it, and you have to deal with the side effects. Find other people who are like yourself, looking for alternative answers, who are open to, finding solutions in non-traditional ways.
Right.
And so that this way you can support and encourage each each other. And, you can find them virtually. They don't have to be in your backyard. They can be around the globe. Find a meetup group, find a Facebook group, find some virtual group that deals with the very issue that you find challenging, that is looking for alternative ways of dealing with it. I mean, if you're in a major city, it's pretty easy. There are so many groups. It's so easy to network now compared to years ago. And if you're not in a major city, then go online. That if you just look, if you just be open and look, you will find other people and you can support each other and you'll be stronger for it.
Correct. I call it being a community taking action for social health care. Essentially, what I've noticed is that in being an epileptic patient, but who also suffers from major depression, and as I said, they kind of correspond in their own way. One causes the other. The thing that I have done to incorporate those, as I call them, gifts in my life, is to be able to create the story that's going to help people in those various groups to be communicating with each other about the disorders, about the solutions in many ways that helps with the depression, as I said earlier, just connecting, not disassociating. If you have split dynamics, as I've described, I sometimes attribute it to the epilepsy itself, but as you mentioned, maybe it was the way I learned to reframe things in order to cope with my own stresses and quality of life. But I would say some groups to join if you're epileptic: FACES, Finding a Cure for Epilepsy and Seizures. That is through the NYU Langone Medical Center. Another one is through the Twitter sphere, as I call it. You have these hashtags, which are communities of people. Hashtag epilepsy. You will find thousands of people on that group talking about epilepsy, from the kind of issues I've mentioned today all the way to quality of life and how to be able to use cannabis oil if you're getting it, and the list goes on. Join your Twitter sphere, hashtag mental health. You'll learn more about depression than you want to. But the point is you need to go and continue to communicate with everyone on your online communities or offline communities, because that is the best way you're going to manage your quality of life. I focused on this show with major depressive disorder because, as I said, it's more current to my situation. It has been a comorbidity and a traumatic reason for it. However, I'm doing what I can, like even with this show itself, to turn that into an opportunity to educate all of you about that. The reason, I wanted to pinpoint, there's bipolar depression and all this other stuff, but I believe that those are symptoms themselves that come and grow from major depressive disorder.
The last thing I just want to say to the audience is watch your language. That in your language, if you own something, if your language is disempowering, that will only make you feel worse. But if you pay attention to your language and you start to shift and change your language, even if it feels mechanical, even if it feels awkward to begin with, it can have a profound effect on your psyche to help you to not own these conditions so much, to help you to be more open to things. Paying attention to what we say, what comes out of our mouth, is as important as what we put into our mouths.
And what I also notice is when you are in mind with your words and you're walking on whatever, all of a sudden you're able to convert the depression into a much more focus and a way of managing that perception.
Absolutely.
What I find is that we're about to end this show, but I will be back next week. Dane will be back with me as well. Sorry he couldn't make today's episode. Again, I do want to point out that this is just the beginning, this particular topic. You can reach me throughout the week at Frank Healthcare on Twitter. Please, at the same time, remember the offer that Mark's Marine Pharmacy has given to everyone on this show through June 30th. Free shipping on your medications from Vancouver, Canada. You could end up paying $1,000 for a 6-month supply of your needed medications. Please take advantage of that offer by mentioning Frank About Health if you call them kenshipmeds.com. It'll tell you the number to dial Jordan as well. All right, everybody, thank you for joining me on this episode. Thank you to Sam for being on this episode.
Thank you for having me on the show, Frank.
Absolutely. And I will see you all, or I will speak to you all next week. Take care.
Ding 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 ding.